Hey everybody, it's Tim and Mary, and we are talking about learning to love your midlife, time loving midlife. Dr. Mary White, how are you?
I'm doing so good. This is especially important for me, this topic, Tim, because I feel like I've worked hard at honing my mental ability throughout my career, but also going into this kind of different stage in my life.
Absolutely, everybody. We are talking about the mental life and how you think about that and how you deal with that as you're going through your midlife time. And listen, everybody, this is the fourth of six conversations. So thank you so much for watching this. And if you find this helpful, please share it with somebody. So the first week we talked about those big stereotypes, the big midlife crisis, how you get to a certain point and it's just one big downhill slog to the end. And we were like, no, that's not how it is. We talked about midlife time being a time of harvest where all of the knowledge and wisdom and experiences you've had can now make a great contribution. You can use all of those to have a wonderful life and to make a contribution. I loved that first discussion.
I loved it too, Tim, because really it's just a matter of reframing. And we've spoken about reframing many, many years, 25 years. We've spoken about you got to reframe things a lot of times and sometimes think about something a little bit differently. So that's why I love that too.
Right. And the midlife time is the time to really do a good job of reframing everybody, because I don't want the last third of my life to be sad and depressing and unproductive. I want it to be when I harvest and have the most fun and get the most out of all the work that I've
Sure.
done. I want to do that. So the second week we talked about the physical life, which of course really resonated with me, talking about um, not being a slave to your body image and what the world thinks of you, but making your body useful as opposed to worrying about it being youthful. And I love this concept, Mary, of what do you want to be able to do when you're 90 physically? And then you need to start planning for that now. And I loved that concept.
Yeah. What a like a mind blown concept. Like, yeah, okay. Yeah. I probably could take a walk around the block, or I probably could take a lap in the pool and things like that. Like, cause you want to be able to move when you're 90. You're so
Right.
good at stretching and all that stuff, Tim. You're so
Well,
really going to help you.
Well, I think so, and I don't do as well as I ought to some days, but it's like I really do think about that. Well, I want to keep my mobility, I want to keep my strength. I don't want to. I want to keep my balance. I want to do all these things I can to so I can have a happy, successful physical life all the way as long as I'm on this plane of existence. Then the
Sure.
third week we talked about the emotional life, and I love this idea of living on a more even keel. I realize that as I go through more and more experiences and live my life, I can see things from a bigger point of view. Things I don't have as many ups and downs. I'm a little more of an even keel. I love the idea of that being one of the benefits of getting older.
And you don't have to react to everything either. You can just let something go. I'm always about this. Take a higher ground. There's no reason to reply, especially in this age, kind of this social media blitz that we're having. I feel like it is really time to step away from some of that and stay on that even keel for sure.
Right. And I feel like right now we live in a time where everybody is instantly outraged. And there's sort of this immediate reaction is sort of how they feel alive. And I feel like that is so sad to me that so many people are living their life from that place. Like getting really upset about something that they see on the news is a way that they feel alive. This is not the way I want to feel alive, Mary. I want
Oh,
to feel alive in all the millions of other ways that are much more pleasant and peaceful and calming.
yes, totally. And I love, love, love. Speaking of the sailboat behind me, an even keel.
Absolutely. It's very nice. So tonight we're talking about the mental life. And I know that this is an area of your expertise and real interest, Mary. And I love this too. I want to be mentally sharp all the way through my whole midlife time and really all the way to the very end of my days. But I have to, just like we talked about with the physical life, how do I want to be able to be mobile and strong when I'm 90? Well, I also need to work on my mental self. How do I want to be mentally when I'm 90? So I'm assuming, is that part of the way you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always thinking about that. Like, my father had Alzheimer's, well, dementia. And so I'm always thinking about that. Like, what did he do? Like, what could have changed that trajectory? Or was it just inherited, genetically, which is certainly something that happens. Um, But I'm always thinking about, what do I want to do to really sharpen the saw? What do I want to do? Well, for one thing, I really want to keep reading, Tim. I want to keep learning. I feel like the more adult learner like you can be, the better.
Well, why would people want to stop learning? Like I think people think about learning as being in school. That's not the way I think about learning. I always want to learn something new, and I want to have new interests. I mean, listen, Mary, they tell you go to a party, and then some people have no idea what to talk to people about, and they're not interesting. Well, it's because they haven't read anything new, gone to a movie, paid attention to like they don't have new things happening in their life that they're paying attention to.
Right.
I feel like I could talk to anybody about anything at any time, I hope. So I think that's a piece of this, though, is so you have to, here's the latest book that I read that I loved, or I read this article online at a website that I love. Let me tell you about these concepts. This is keeping yourself mentally engaged.
Right. I completely agree with that, Tim. And you know what? Like, you have to be an adult learner. And to me, the difference between an adult learner and a child learner in school is because you want to learn. It's a need to know. So get needing to know things. You know what I mean? Like, need to know things. Like, I have FOMO a little bit. I got to know a lot of stuff.
Well, the thing too is that I love is you take agency over it, and you're like, well, what is interesting to me? What do I care about right now? What's piquing my interest right now? Let
Right.
me learn something about that. I think that's really interesting. This is a way I think that you can get young people interested in reading. It's like, okay, you love motorcycles? Let's find a motorcycle magazine and let's
Right.
learn some stuff about like this. They realize, oh, I like reading when it's about this, right? So it's the same thing for me now. What am I interested in? What if I'm interested right now in having a better midlife. So I read a book about having a better midlife, and
Right.
we're talking about it. But that's just an example.
But Tim, it doesn't have to be like, I'm saying you don't need to all of a sudden start reading if you've never been a reader. That's not going to be, but maybe you can put together Legos. I mean, I know there are some of these Lego kits that are like incredibly, what's the word, difficult and not time consuming. I'm sure they're time consuming, but they're intricate. That's the word
Yes.
I'm looking for. Thank you. And I think that's an option, or put together something like that, or do crafts or something like that. A lot of people are interested in that. There's so many people who have such amazing skills to me. Like, if I could sew, not that I want to get a sewing machine right now or have the time for it, but a lot of people know how to sew. And I think that's such a great, um, activity to engage in.
Right. And we're talking about just continuing to be engaged with the world and learn new skills, learn new things, however that manifests for you. Mary, I've been thinking so much about my father,
Hmm.
right? Because his birthday is right around this time, as was my parents' anniversary. And if I lost my father, gosh, I guess it's been a couple years now, has it? Okay. But I think about him all the time. For one
Right.
thing, his lamps and his stuff is all over our bed and breakfast. And so I talk about him and his work all the time. But one of the things that I often tell people about my father is that he always had something going. He was always trying something new. And I didn't really appreciate this. I always thought, well, he's painting and he's trying to play the organ and he's playing the banjo and he's doing this. And he wasn't like great at all of it. I got caught up in that mistake.
Yeah.
We're thinking you have to be great at something to enjoy doing it or to engage in it. And
Exactly.
no, he loved doing all of it. And he was and the other thing, Mary, he loved puzzles. And it kept his brain going. He could work on a puzzle. He always had a puzzle going.
Right. And isn't that awesome? I mean, my parents, Tim, were the same way. I think you knew that already. They were always into drum corps and things like that, but they would go through hobbies. Like, they went on this fishing hobby where they would fish for years off the bridge, off the bridge in Stewart. And I'd be like, they're on the bridge fishing and, thinking it's crazy. And then they would go to something would affect fishermen, like some sort of new local law. And they would go to the meeting, about this local law. And then they had a used furniture business. And then they would redo furniture. And then my father made furniture all the way till, it became unsafe to use the tools and saws and things like that. But I mean, they always had something going. Always.
Well, and I just think that's, your parents were like this, and your whole family has had this. Like, you aren't going to sit around, right? You're engaged with the world. You're always trying something new, doing something new. And this is what we're talking to everybody when we're talking about engaging in the mental life in your midlife time, is staying engaged in whatever that looks like. But don't just sit and turn on the TV, because just like when we talked about the physical life, I've known a lot of very nice people who retired, sat down in front of the TV, and that was it. They stopped moving, they stopped thinking, they stopped reading. So not only did their physical life really decline, but their mental life did as well. And I don't want that to happen to me.
100%. And it's kind of actually, Tim, it's scary for me to think of it. You know, like I'm scared to think of, like, I feel I'm pretty intelligent at times, um, sometimes not so much common sense.
Dr. Mary White, you're doing okay.
Yeah, I'm doing okay.
But I think sometimes that caution of is part of the motivation. It's sort of like for me physically, it's like, well, the day I think about not going to the gym, I'm like, well, listen, I need to stay on top of this. I think that there's something healthy about knowing that you need to be on top of it.
Right. I mean, the being anxious about it is something else. I mean, I don't need necessarily to be anxious, but every day I do like 5 puzzles. I do every day, Tim, the New York Times mini crossword puzzle, the New York Times regular crossword puzzle, Wordle, connections, and strands, all from the New York Times app. And
so do you do this because it's fun, or do you do this because it's part of your mental acuity program?
both. I mean, when I finished a PhD many years ago, I said I was going to do crossword puzzles. I loved crossword puzzles. My mother loved crossword puzzles. My brother loves crossword puzzles. Everybody, my mother sat me down. That's how I learned vocabulary words, was really doing crossword puzzles. So, but I really couldn't engage in it when I was within a PhD program. So after I was done, guess what? I started it. I bought the New York Times Games app and I do it. By the way, the mini puzzle, strands, connections, and Wordle are all free online. You don't have to subscribe. So they won't keep track of it like like I will on my phone. But you know what, Tim? Let me tell you my day, because it's crazy, crazy, crazy. But tomorrow will be my thousandth crossword puzzle, New York Times crossword puzzle. Yeah,
Perfect timing for this conversation.
like it's so stupid, and sometimes I have to have a little bit of scaffolding or an assist, like
It doesn't matter, but you're engaging, right? You're challenging yourself. You're doing something mental each day. I have this little puzzle app that my husband got me turned on to, and I do this little, and it's kind of like a crossword puzzle where it gives you the
letters.
letters,
I
and
do that.
then you have to figure out, make words out of it. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this every morning. And sometimes they're really hard, and I'm like, this is good for me, and it's a way that I sort of start my day.
Right. That's the way I start my day too. Like I can, and sometimes it takes me, like if I have a 5-minute break and I'm still doing the puzzle, I'll do it. And then I come home and have dinner, do something, and then whatever, and then do a little bit more, and it's eventually done.
But figure out, the idea, everybody, is figure out what is interesting to you. How do you want to engage? But keep yourself engaged. Keep learning, keep reading, keep finding out about stuff, keep trying new things, try new hobbies. Just stay engaged and keep your mental processes going. Don't just sit and watch the TV and be passive.
Yeah, and you don't have to. I keep on talking about reading, but if you're not a reader, you're not an everyday reader. Listen to a book on. I'm gonna so date myself by this, Tim. Allow me to say it, and then I'll change the word. A book on tape, but now let me say an audiobook. I mean, that is fine too. That's reading. You know,
Sure.
did I tell you one Christmas? I maybe didn't. Well, like in between Christmas and New Year's, Noel is traditionally off, and we started listening to this book on a drive. And we listened to the whole series of books. We didn't turn on the TV once. It was like one of our favorite times, like, because we would just sit and engaged in a book on audiobook. It's really break that habit, Tim.
You can say book on tape. I know what you mean. It doesn't matter. But the point is, you are engaged in a story. You're listening, and I do think that counts as engaging in listening to the story. I have friends that do a lot of driving for their job, and they will listen to books on tape and all the time that they're in the car, and it's really engaging. A lot of our book club members here at Phantom History House do their books that way, and it's like, it doesn't matter. You're getting the story, you're hearing the story. I personally like to sit down with my book or my tablet because I find that really, really engaging. But I do like, if I'm driving a couple hours somewhere, I do like a book on tape. It's makes the time go by really fast.
And I know your favorite books on tape, audiobooks.
Do what now?
I know your favorite ones.
Oh, do you?
The Harry Potter series. Oh, is you?
I've listened to many of the Harry Potters many, many times when traveling up to do band clinics. Yeah, and of course, those are fantastic recordings and performances. But I've got some friends who've turned me on to some other genres that are really fun, and I enjoy engaging with a story, and I'm keeping my mind going. It's not just mind-numbing scrolling, seeing what the latest meme is. Listen, that can be a great way to turn off your brain, but the idea, everybody, is stay engaged mentally. There was a concept in the book that we're using sort of as a springboard for our conversations called Learning to Love Midlife by Chip Conley. One of the things he talks about when he's talking about the mental life is the difference in knowledge and wisdom. And I thought this was very interesting. Do you want to tell me what you feel like your definition is of those words?
So this is what I feel like. I feel like knowledge is a bunch of facts. Like Mary White is really good at trivia. She can do the crossword puzzle. She can do trivia. She can win for your team at the bar. Whatever, she is gonna do it. That's knowledge. Like I have a bunch of collected facts, a bunch of collected information. I really think wisdom is, how do you use those things? And plus, how do you use those things that happened in the past? Like, how do I know? Take a higher ground, Mary, because digging in the mud is only going to make the pig and you dirty. Just stay out of the mud. And that to me is wisdom, is where you take your prior experiences, you take what you know, the knowledge, and then you elevate it into some sort of, I don't want to say the word ethereal, but some sort of different realm where you're using it to create a bigger space, a greater space of calmness too. I mean,
Yeah,
using
absolutely.
wisdom is
Absolutely.
so much calmer.
So there's a couple quotes that I liked that were mentioned in the book. One is, knowledge is in your phone, wisdom is in your gut.
Well, gosh, why didn't I say that too?
Well, it's okay, but it's very concise. Somebody had time to sit down and think that through. And here's another quote from a man named John Dewey. Information is knowledge, which is, do what?
John Dewey. He's a very famous, well, people in education know John Dewey because he's like the learning by doing guy.
Right.
Not decimal, by the way.
Right. That the philosopher guy, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So here's what he said. Information is knowledge, which is merely acquired and stored up. Wisdom is knowledge operating in the direction of powers to the better living of life.
Yeah, that's why I said it takes on a different kind of, ethereal is the wrong word, but it takes on a different meaning to help you move forward rather than just stay back there.
Right. And there's another concept around this I thought was really interesting. It's the concept of patterns, which is something that you get with experience and time. And here I'm going to read this quote. The longer we've been on the planet, the more knowledge and experience we've accumulated and the more patterns we've seen. These are the raw materials for wisdom. By midlife, we're experts in the school of life. We've become masters at pattern recognition. We can connect the dots faster and more effectively. I felt like this was a really great way to sort of describe this whole mental. It sucks.
It wouldn't be a podcast without Socks walking across.
You had to have a cat up here. So I do like this idea of recognizing patterns, because I feel like that is it reminds me of the conversation we had about emotions and being less emotional. It's like, I've been here, I've seen this play out before, and recognizing those patterns of how things work is a mental process. But I feel like that's how you get to wisdom. I think that's the concept. That's how you get to wisdom from knowledge.
And you can really you can get into bad patterns, Tim, that cause maybe toxicity or something like that, where it's not, leading you to that. So really those patterns, and it reminded me of the emotional life one too, because it's all about, hey, we've done this before. We don't need to do it again. Let's break this cycle. And there we go. We're just going to walk right across there.
It doesn't matter. But I like this idea, Mary, of wisdom being I have all this knowledge, but then when I recognize the patterns and I put it in a bigger context from my
Yep.
whole life of experiences, that's where it becomes wisdom. I love this whole idea.
He agrees.
There's another quote I really love that he mentioned about this by Steve Jobs, of course, who we all know and I
We know.
admire greatly. By the way, his autobiography is fantastic. Um, you cannot connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward.
Wow. Why am I not coming up with better quotes like this? Is
No, you did great. But I
these
think this is a really great idea. It's like as you have the more and more years of experience to look back, it's much easier to connect those dots because you have been through so much and you know how things connect instantly. Like I've been there. I mean, even things going on in the news right now, and I'm like, oh, well, I know how this is going to play out, and I know how this is going to go over here because we've been here before. I've seen these patterns play out. And of course, the whole thing about if you don't learn your history, you're going to repeat it. And this is what I feel like we're constantly doing these days.
yeah, and not it's often attributed to Winston Churchill, but probably not him. But that's a fact I have. Tim, that's a little tiny piece of knowledge. But anyway, yes, I completely agree. Like you learn to look at those patterns and often not repeat some of them, but really take those patterns, been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, time to move on.
Right. And as you mentioned before, it's also recognizing patterns that did not serve me well in the past. Right. Well, here's a stupid mistake I did before. Maybe I don't do that again. That is wisdom coming out to play because I'm like, okay, I have done this before. I recognize that pattern. And I think I've said before, even on these conversations, one of the real breakthroughs for me in my life was when I started to recognize these negative patterns, these negative habits. And as soon as I got where I could see it and recognize it,
Yeah.
it took all the power away from it. So no longer did I spiral down, but I was like, oh, there's that thing I do. I recognize this moment. I recognize this habit. I recognize this pattern. And that was so powerful to me because no longer did that, oh no, I'm about to go down this spiral. I stopped going down the spiral because I could back up and see it for what it was. And I was like, oh man, I don't need to do that. I
Yeah.
know where that's going to take me.
Maya Angelou says, when you know better, you do better.
It's fantastic. Yeah. So this is a mental thing, everybody, because you've been there, you have the knowledge, you have the experience, and then you start to see the patterns and you start to recognize things. This
Hmm.
is one of the great things about getting to your midlife time. This is one of the gifts of getting older, is that you can take all of that experience and knowledge and turn it into wisdom and not make the same mistakes over and over, and hopefully help guide other people. Share your one of the things they recommend you do is share your wisdom with other people, with young people in some way. This is sort of what we're doing right now, right? Like the idea is let's share some of these things we've learned and maybe somebody will find this and want to watch this and get something out of it. It feels good for me to share some of the wisdom that I think I might have accrued.
Right. Is don't get oversharing or don't. I mean, people have to welcome that, but
Of course.
you know, many people, if I have done talks about leadership and things like that, and people appreciate that I'm sharing, what I've learned by my mistakes, as well as the patterns, as well as anything that I've gone through. Yes, I mean, you know,
Yeah.
uh, it's good to share.
And this is why we like to read or listen to an audio version of a book that is someone has shared their knowledge and their wisdom, and they can tell you, okay, well, here are things I learned that really helped me. I love reading sort of self-help kind of books. I do read a lot of those because I find them very, very helpful and interesting to me.
I just finished reading Ina Garden's "Be Ready When the Luck Happens."
Say it again.
Ina Garden, do you know who she is?
Mm-mm.
Okay, well, Ina Garden's on the Food Network, and she had a show on the Food Network called The Barefoot Contessa. It's
Oh,
very She was on in Southampton. Well, she wrote an autobiography recently. It's called Be Ready When the Luck Happens. And I just thought it was terrific. It didn't take me long to read. And she really talks about that all her experiences and all her knowledge and all her wisdom, she was ready to go. Like when something big was going to happen, she was ready to go because, I mean, it was kind of lucky that she got there, but in some ways, but she really did use everything she had learned and she was reaping what she sowed for sure. So it's very good.
Isn't that quote, luck favors the prepared mind?
Yeah, I've not heard of that, but I love it.
But I mean, this is the whole thing. People say that it's luck, but like you have to be ready to take advantage of this opportunity when it's lucky enough to show up, but you've prepared yourself. Like, because somebody else could have the same lucky break happen, but they're not ready. They haven't done the work to make themselves prepared in all the
Hmm.
different ways that we're talking about in this series. And so I think this is what a lot of people attribute to luck. You know, oh, there's this Broadway star. They get this lucky break. No, they've been working at their craft for years and being ready to step in at that moment. You have to do the work to be ready to take advantage of that lucky break.
Correct. I always think about that when people talk about singers. Oh, they're not a good singer. Do you know how hard they work to get there? I mean, whether you like them or not, I mean, they're talented
Yeah,
and because they're ready. But I love what you said about be ready, you know,
right.
amass it all, and then you're ready to be wise.
Right. The other big concept that Chip Conley talks about in his book, we're using the book Learning to Love Midlife by Chip Conley to serve as a guide. One of the other concepts he talks about when you get to the midlife, and we've discussed this in other venues when we're talking about it here with the mental life, he talks about sort of editing your life. You learn how to edit your life and you decide, I'm going to let this go. He talks about sort of shedding your skin when you get to this age, and you can say, okay, here's some things that I've been doing or that I've been living with, and I'm just going to let that go. I'm going to peel that right off and let it go. You know, and he talks about you're not your job, you're not your bank account, you're not your trophy wife. Like you are, what are you underneath all of that? I think when you get to your midlife time and you've done all this work that we were just describing,
Right.
then you can sort of have you can
Yeah.
give yourself permission to let a lot of those masks we wear, take it off and put it away. This is incredibly freeing and exciting.
And to call those, it has to be so releasing, to eliminate those. It has to be releasing. That has something to do with your physical life too, like to shed that what people may think about you, they don't know you, you know. So I do like that.
Yeah,
And
we
also,
talked a lot about not worrying so much about what people think.
yeah, I was thinking about also shed some old patterns perhaps, but also some, like I think we talked about this, Tim, but you don't have to, you can say no. It's okay to say no to somebody. This is something that I really struggled with in my career, was saying no, just because um
Well, and sometimes you feel like I have to do this because of such and such and such and such. But I do think, like they said, one of the gifts of getting older is you can say, either that wasn't really true or that's not really important to me now. What really matters to me now? Where do I want to spend my time? Who are the people I want to be around? I
yeah,
spend a lot less time around people I might have felt in like I had to be around someone or sort of tolerate. And now I'm like, I'm not interested anymore. I don't feel the requirement.
yeah, no, I completely agree. Like you don't have to go to that party if you don't want to, where you might have felt like you have to, for sure.
Yeah, he talks about the great midlife edit is what he calls it. What do I let go? What do I keep? What do I change?
Say those three again. I like it.
What do I let go? What do I keep? And what do I change?
Hmm.
Something to think about, everybody, as you're thinking about the mental life that you want here in the midlife time. There's something to think about. What things in my life do I just want to let go? I don't need them anymore. What things do I want to change and do differently? And what things do I definitely want to keep that I like and that are working well
Right.
for me?
Yes. Wow, it's really great food for thought. I could think of myself like either making a mental list or an actual physical list.
Yeah,
I
absolutely. I think writing things down is very powerful, everybody. If we're talking about doing mental processes, I think making lists is a really good thing, especially if you're trying to make a big decision, put the pro and
yeah,
cons on either side, but I think writing things down is very powerful. I think that's why a lot of people like journaling, that kind of thing. But I do think, I do sit down each year and write down, here's my goals, here are things I want to try to accomplish in the next year. I find that very helpful and productive for me.
you're so good about that, Tim.
Well, it's just something that I think is really healthy to do. And I do like doing it at the beginning of the new year. I don't feel pressure and I don't call them resolutions because those are broken, but I do like thinking about where am I? I think taking stock of your life is a good thing. Do it at your
Yeah.
birthday, do it on July 4th. It doesn't matter, but to take stock and like, where am I? This is sort of what he's talking about here. As you're thinking about your mental life, as you're getting older, we're like, take stock. Well, what do I really, let me think about my life. What things in my life do I want to keep? Do I really want to have around? What things can I just let go, and what things do I need to do differently? Do I need to change, maybe do things a little differently? Part of it is because I now have the ability to have those patterns, see those patterns, have
Mhm.
that wisdom over all the years. All of it comes together.
I think too, like Tim, this is a kind of a metaphor, but after I stopped working, one of the things I did was cleaned out my closet of work work clothes, if you will. I mean, some things I kept just, and now I'm going to do it again. You know what I mean? Like, but I do it all the time. Like, well, gee, I'm never going to wear that blazer again. Never.
Yeah, that's one of the gifts of moving. I'm about to move again, and it's very hard work to move. But one of the gifts of it is you purge your life. You go through that process of what do I, Mary, you helped me with this when I moved last couple of years
Ooh,
ago. What do I need to get rid of? What do I want to keep? What's really important to me? You don't want to schlep a lot of stuff around with you. So part of the same sort of mental process we're talking about. Take stock, have some thought, think about this. And then the other big point we made tonight that I loved, Mary, was really like our parents did, stay engaged, keep learning, figure out what you're interested in, find new interesting things to go or do, or just stay engaged with life and interested in life. There's so much to do and see and learn out there.
you know what I've been reading a lot lately, Tim, like just in newspapers or magazine articles or things like that, or just seeing that there's a lot of loneliness. And I do not think that is good. You could be around a lot of people and be lonely, but I think there's many people because they've lost spouses or whatever who are alone. And how, I think that's something to think about, like how to engage in a community that will help you through that or something, because that to me is must be very tough.
Right. And I think that was one of the things we talked about a little bit when we talked about the emotional life, because we had some tips for everybody go back and check that recording out that's available on the YouTube channel, because we talked about, there are suggestions for how to engage with life if you are feeling lonely, and a lot of people do. And part of the way to do it is the stuff we're talking about tonight, right? Join a book club, find a way to volunteer, find somewhere to be engaged, go join some sort of group. There's all kinds of, go join a yoga studio. You'll meet people, you engage with people. Volunteering is absolutely helpful, whatever you like. There's a group helping dogs, or gosh, there's a skunk
Right.
rescue here in Oldsmar, heaven forbid. So I met a woman one time that told me skunks are my life. It was the most fascinating.
What did she?
Skunks are my life, is what she said. It was so interesting, but she was very engaged in skunk rescues, which was a thing I didn't even know about. And I was like, well, first off, I think I'll never hear that sentence spoken to me again. But it was interesting. She was engaged and actively involved in something that brought her
Right.
a lot of joy. And this is something we've been talking about every single week. This is the bottom line, everybody. Figure out, do some thinking. What actually brings you joy, right? If you're trying to stay physically fit, what way of doing that brings you joy? And then do it. You want to stay mentally active. What brings you joy? Is it reading? Is it doing puzzles? Is it going to a book club group? It's whatever it is. Stay mentally engaged. Read that article, study that thing over here, take an online course. There's tons and tons of ways to do it.
Talk to your neighbor.
Yeah,
I
be a good neighbor. Absolutely.
we always talk about being kind too. So that's always a way to
Yeah.
stay engaged, for sure.
Yeah, that's sort of like the bottom line of all of it is be kind, and is what I'm doing loving, right? Is it a loving thing to do? And if it's not a loving thing to do, then you need to stop and rethink. And that's true of everything in our world that we see happening around us. Just ask yourself, is that a loving thing that I see that person doing? And if it's not, then it's not honorable, and there's something wrong about the way they're thinking and acting.
Sure.
Then I want to make sure that the way I'm moving through the world is bringing me joy and is loving toward others. So That can sound cliche, but that is really the thing I've been thinking a whole lot about lately, Mary, because it's the way that keeps me grounded, right? What can I do that's loving if I see things around me that aren't?
I love that, Tim. You know, I love it for sure. You know, how are you being useful?
Yeah, yeah. This is the bottom line: is stay engaged. Everybody, don't turn off. Keep yourself going. Just like we talked about. What do I want to be able to do when I'm 90 physically? What do I want to be able to do when I'm 90 mentally? I want to still be sharp and engaged and be able to have a great conversation and read a book and go on that trip and all the stuff. And you think about that. You need to think about that now as you're in your midlife time and start to work toward that. And then, Mary, it doesn't become a chore, but it becomes sort of like an exciting adventure. Like, okay, I'm going to keep myself physically fit because I have all these things I want to get to do, right? As
Yeah,
opposed to, oh, I got to go to the gym one more time.
you want to walk in the Roman Colosseum, you know.
You bet I do, and I'd be happy to do that when I'm 90 years old. Why not, right? I
Right?
want to be able to ride in a gondola down in Venice, like it's the most wonderful thing in the world. I want to be able to step into that gondola, right? So I've got to stay physically active, and I want to be able to read the greatest novels in the world. I want to be able to read my Dickens novels all the way through my life. So I need to stay engaged and keep doing that. There's example after example. Everybody figure out what it is for you, right? Whatever it is, everybody's different. The world is full of millions of interesting things and ways to do stuff, but figure out how to stay engaged. Mary, what would you want to say as we're closing this conversation about the mental life?
Okay, so I really love this one, Tim, this particular episode of this, but I do think it connects to all the other episodes that
Sure.
to go back because I'm really making some connections about all of it and really seeing it as a big circle and a big process. So I think it has value to really go back. And they're short, they're not very long, and to really think and make connections on connections on connections and really build a good, thorough understanding of some of this stuff. And it's really been helpful.
Which is the way that we describe wisdom happening, everybody. You find those patterns, you take the knowledge, and then you do something with it. You find those patterns, you make bigger extrapolations. Mary, I've loved this conversation with you. I knew that you would be wonderful talking about the mental life. I love how you are. I love the way you engage with life. I love the way you use your mind. And I love how you're sharing that. And thank you for doing that with me tonight.
Oh, Tim, stop. Don't stop. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for watching. The next time we're here in 2 weeks from now, actually it's going to be 4 weeks for the next one. We're going to be talking about the vocational life, which is going to be very interesting. Thank you, Mary. I loved this.